Okay, we should be live now. All right.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to webinar number 13.
Wouldn't it be? Yeah.
It's our new year of webinars. So
So
we,
we're basically phoning it in.
yeah. Anyways, welcome. I don't, what do we have to talk about? I don't think we have a specified topic as of yet.
No, we're not. This is a open forum, question and answer. Raise your hand, and we can let you talk if you want, or just type in the chat a question, and we can answer it. Well, we can try and answer it. And yeah, we just don't really. We covered 12 topics now, roughly, technically. And we figured we'd just have an open forum because it's way easier for us. We don't know how long we'll be doing this in the future, but
we've tried to cover all the topics concerning at least getting started or intermediate use on the Central Station 3. And kind of we do have a question which we were just about to get into, or I was. This is the new update information. Well, as far as what we have, we've loaded our updates. I'll share my screen here. Oops, keep hitting that wrong button. Keep hitting that button that says who can share. And let's go share screen. All right, so shares the screen. So for those who are not familiar with, when you do have an update available, and let's close this window, you will see, especially you do need to be connected to your network, either through a router or wireless router, or what have you. The CS3 has to be connected using an Ethernet cable. You will see a red dot on the lower part of the system button here, up in the upper left corner. And when you open that up, you will also see a red dot under the CS3 icon. There will probably be one more red dot, and that's going to be on the system button. And so when you do need to click on that avenue there, and just so you know which version it is, you see these triangles, they toggle these panels open or close. So you can just close that open, and then you can go under the, let's see, what was it? The device and software information. So our current version is now 2.3.1. 2.3.1 parentheses 8. Your hardware versions will vary. This is an earlier model, so 3.03. Yeah, you might have a newer hardware version, but the software version is what you're going to be checking for. And you can see the green check mark under the CS3 icon that tells me from the internet that my system is up to date. You will see an icon in the right corner here. Let's see if I can draw a little annotations just so you guys can see what's going on. So you will see an icon here on the right panel. It's kind of an ugly version of it. It will look something like that. You click on that initiates.
but not in red.
Yeah, not red. It will initiate the update. Next thing you will do once you kind of complete the update, there is more than likely going to be a subsystem update. You will see again when you're at that ending page, you'll see probably a red icon here, and then you click on it, and in most cases you'll probably see it under the TFP3. And so looking at the system button, you're not going to see anything. So you'll need to click on this, and you'll see an update button. Sometimes, occasionally, you might see one of these other topics, but usually it's the TFP3, which is actually part of, I think it's actually part of the CAN bus system. But you'll see an update button. Make sure you do the subsystem update. How are we on details? I'm kind of vague on what the actual improvements were. Rick, do you know?
Yeah, me too. I haven't explored them that much. I've been too busy with other things. We've noticed that a couple people have said that their S88s don't work after the update, but after a reboot, they did work. Icons for LGB are kind of a little bit of a problem because there's no file for the LGB icons anymore.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, even though they're in there, you can't find them. You can't go to them. But if you have an LGB locomotive in your central station, you can click on the icon to change it, and it will take you to that file that way, from what I recall. I only looked at it once. But
Yes. So
quite a
the yeah, the experience I have on this, and let me just kind of just before we get too far into the topic, when you sort of have S88s that are getting buggy, check for that subsystem update and do what Rick said, reboot the system. Um, I also got a call regarding the LGB icons, and it turns out, and I don't really recall, is that is that folder? There's a folder hierarchy now. Was that LGB folder always there, or is that a new thing?
It was in the last update is when I noticed it, the previous update, and now and it was populated with all the LGB icons, and now it only has 2 icons. That
Okay.
folder right there.
Yeah, so here's an LGB folder, guys. So it will contain LGB
No, no,
locomotive.
no, no. You really?
Well, that's one way to access it, right? Because you have, all right, so let's look at the hierarchies. The CS3 has a loc icons folder, which is now selected, right? Otherwise, it'll look like that. Select on it and it opens it up. The loc
Right.
icons folder has the LGB folder in it, and you click on that, and there it is on the right.
Yeah, but the update I have only had 2 icons in there, so maybe there was another update and it got fixed since.
Yeah, possibly. Or, it's just like some of these icons, when it comes to icons and loading and stuff like that, maybe they're not registering right away. Check your system again. Who knows? Maybe it's in there.
I'm checking mine right now.
Yeah.
We're gonna see. We're gonna see this.
All right. Let's share your screen and just see what you come up with.
Okay, let me get out of this so I can.
All right.
Okay, so
What if you want to do that, and I can answer a couple of questions, or
well, there's one quick question here about somebody asks about screwing down C-track turnouts. Now, in general, no, you don't want to screw down turnouts because you don't want them to torque and misalign the motor and the levers and stuff in there, and then they won't switch. I think the C-track turnout's a little bit more forgiving. You probably can. I wouldn't tighten them down too tight, but in general, me personally, I would not screw them down just to be safe.
yeah, and you can actually secure a turnout if like screw down one or two of the tracks around it. That's going to keep it from.
Yeah. You screw down the ones that are attached to it. Maybe at the other end of the ones that are attached to it if you really want to be safe. But you want turnouts to float, especially if they're on a grade or if they're coming over a hill or something like that. You're just asking for trouble.
Yeah, and generally some of that is involved in whether or not it's like I've had turnouts that are going over sort of the ridge of an incline, and it's just like it's not necessarily the greatest thing to do because you do flex the track a little bit, and that's the last thing you want to do is kind of alter the level geometry under a turnout. So and you keep that in mind. Basically if your turnouts get stuck, then kind of look to see if they're actually pressured down or not. So
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. Hang on a second. I need to get out of this. Okay. So get out of that. Okay, now I will share my screen and we'll see what happens with these icons. Now this is a CS3 that I have updated. It's not on my layout. It's a second CS3 I have, And this is the only one I updated because I wanted one with an update and one with the previous version just for a little while at least. So here we have the obviously the control, the locomotive inventory list. And first thing I'm going to do, okay, we're going to assume that I'm putting in a locomotive. And don't mind this icon. That's me and my twisted sense of humor that I loaded my own default icon. So we're going to say it's DCC Loc 3 and all that stuff, and that's fine. And I can change the icon, go to the LGB folder, and yeah, it looks like the update, it looks like they corrected that error, because when I looked at this before, there was only 2 icons in here. So
Yeah, there you go.
yeah, there you
Is
go.
the inventory set in there? Do you see it in there? The Jupiter and the
Yeah, it should be 29,000. Yeah.
there you go. Nice. You can say you guys have an icon if you don't have the $10,000 set. So,
Yeah. I actually have one in here for warranty repair.
shh, not supposed to say that out loud.
Oh. Well.
All right, let's. We got another question here. What are the limits on names for devices? I tried changing the names of my turnouts. It seems to work, but when I restarted the CS3, it screwed up the track plan after Virtua saved, set up to recover. All right. Well, at least you're asking about the CS3 limits. Thankfully, the name limits are a lot longer than they were on the CS2. CS2 drove me nuts because I think we were limited to like 8 letters.
Eight characters. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as, the names getting screwed up on your turnouts, one thing I would definitely recommend it, and what I'm saying is I don't really have an answer for why they would screw up. The only thing I can kind of think of that happens is, let's say you and correct, I could be wrong on how your procedure is, but let's say you change the name of all your items here, and let me go ahead and just do one here, just kind of show the process here. Let's say you go ahead and change the name. Let's call that break one. Make sure you change it up in the text box, because changing it down below, it gets frustrating because once you click, it doesn't save it. Oops, wrong kind of break. Break one.
You're not sharing your screen.
Oh, duh. Thanks again. Let me share the screen. Sorry. Okay, yeah. So if you're changing the name, just kind of we're just gonna make your answer longer for some extra instructions. So if you click on this and you change your name down here, it doesn't actually change. You actually need to type in the keyboard section up here, change your name, click OK. So that saves it in the actual sort of device list. And you see it took a while, that second to update. You have it in here. Now, when you do make these changes, it's common for users to just kind of go ahead and, well, I'm done playing, I'll shut down the system. What happens is, what we're doing is, in this method, is you're basically working on the operating memory of the Central Station 3. And to be frank with you, when you reboot just off of the operation memory, it doesn't always change, especially if you have a lot of changes. So it kind of goes back to what its old operating memory is. You can think of it as a cycle time when that updates. I don't really know what that figure is. So what I definitely recommend to do is, when you make these changes and you're done playing, you want to click save, and you actually want to create your backup. Now, this up in the blue is your default title. You can see on this middle column here, I've got all these versions numbered, and they're all basically sort of my layout, and they're with different dates and those different build up increments that I've done. So some I have some improvements, some I've experimented with. If you're experimenting with it, you don't want to do that. But the reason is, you want to do this backup, and then go ahead and save it. So even if you're not going to really use that, for some reason, it seems to want to keep that operational memory in there. but in case you don't, then you always have that restore point. So you might gripe about having to restore the file, but that's where that's going to ensure that that information is saved and you make changes. And I can kind of pretty much say with a certainty that if you just shut down after making changes, you're taking a chance. You really are taking a chance that the changes aren't going to hold, because I've rebooted my system and I said, oh, what happened to all the changes that I did? And, and when you're doing extensive stuff like creating advanced events and stuff like that, that's the last thing you want to lose. And also kind of make sure, you want to do these when you actually know everything's working. If you kind of make all these changes and it's not working, it's like up to you whether or not you want to save that, because it's going to reload the non-functioning systems rather than kind of getting you back to a good working point.
And not only that, you want to make sure you shut down correctly. We have people questions not all the time, but where they just unplug their central station, and that doesn't save the data. They don't shut down, they just unplug it.
Yeah, and definitely, again, as we kind of saying, save, do a shutdown. Don't just unplug it or anything like that. You lose that operational data. It's important to realize that operational data and save data are going to be two different things to some degree. Okay. Is there a way to register an MFX Locomotive when the CS3 does not when the C doesn't discover the Loco?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, go ahead. You wanna
show that? Well, you got to stop sharing.
Am I still sharing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, there you go. It's all you.
Okay. Okay, so here we got the basic screen. When you want to add a locomotive, the easiest way is just go to the plus. Okay, and here you can add it manually. I know this isn't your question, but you can add it manually and set everything up. This is for a non-MFX locomotive. For an MFX locomotive, if it doesn't register it, there could be a couple things wrong. You could have dirty track. You push it along and make sure it is actually not registering. But what you want to do is you'll want to rediscover lost MFX locomotives right here. And what that's going to do is that's going to start a search for basically all the locomotives it has in its inventory and look for anything new. The locomotives don't have to be on the track that are in your inventory, but it'll go through those and it'll go through the ones it reads on the track. And right now it's going to say it can't find any because this central station is not hooked up to any track. The other reason why it might, besides dirty track, is you might have cut the power when it was doing a register, and is what we call a partial registration. And a partial registration, it already has the handshake with the central station and the decoder, so it kind of recognizes that the central station thinks it's already registered it because it has a handshake. If that rediscover doesn't work, what you want to do is you want to take that locomotive off the track. If it's in your inventory and it doesn't respond, you'll want to delete it from your inventory when the locomotive's on the track, and then take the locomotive off the track, put it on another controller. Now, by another controller, it's another central station, another a mobile station, and that way it will create a handshake with a different device, which will break the handshake with the original central station. And we haven't tested this because it's kind of hard to recreate the partial registration, but we've heard that you can either also put it on a analog transformer and give it a little power. Do not reverse it, but give it a little power, and it should break the handshake going on a regular transformer, an analog transformer. And then you put it on your layout again and let your central station, it should recognize it automatically at that point. But basically it's the handshake you have to break, and sometimes it's a little bit of a procedure.
Yeah, the handshake thing, it gets confusing for many of us because you don't realize that it's sort of that joint association that each device knows it had been registered with the other. Um, if you have it in your icon database or your locomotive database and you have the locomotive on the track and you see them both, but it's not working, uh, as Rick said, delete that locomotive from your database while the train is on track. Um, and then you can try to re-register it. It's also a little safe between that to cycle start your CS3 in case, maybe it's held up in some kind of remnant memory. Uh, so, and that's just sort of adding an extra action to try to make sure everything is cleared out. So, as Rick said, delete it. I might, try to shut it down for a bit and then turn it back on and then try to re-register. If that really doesn't work, then pretty much breaking that handshake by signing it into another system is kind of the only way you need to do it at that point, because the locomotive decoder still has a lock and says, oh, I've already been registered with this CS3 unit, and that kind of prevents it from actually registering. The next question, I think maybe you could answer this one. How do you display CS3 Loco icons and how to get to it? Kind of covered that with the LGB icon.
Yeah, basically we can go through that again. Let me see. Again.
And just while he's doing that, again, folks, this is an open forum. So if you have any questions or you'd like to kind of, if you have something you'd like to say, you can raise your hand in the chat box or just post in your question. Thanks.
Okay, so let's say I have my my locomotive here with the goofy icon. Say I want to change this icon. All you do is, let me back up here. You click on Edit up here on your inventory list, and we'll go to Edit Locomotives. We'll choose the locomotive you want to change the icon for.
Now you
And
may have question marks like he does here, but without the goofy icon.
right, you would normally get 3 question marks here like you see in the window. I was just seeing if I could change that default question mark to this, and yeah, it works. So you can put any picture you want in there. So what I did is I clicked on that icon with the broken locomotive, and it brings me to this folder, which is a CS3 Loc Icons folder. It brought me to the middle of the, well, towards the bottom of the menu, because that's where this icon is stored, because it goes by name. So I'm, 3/4 of the way down the list. So if I want to change it to a different locomotive, if I know the type of locomotive, like it's a class 2024, I can just enter class 24, and there aren't any class 24s by that name, so it can be a 24. And it'll find anything with a 24, and you'll see there's 248, 243. There's a whole bunch. I can probably do a BR24 if I wanted, if I'm looking for a specific class 24. I can probably put that road number in. But here's a gray class 24. There's a couple of gray class 24s. And you can just go through the list like that. The more information you give it up here at the top, the better it'll be. So let's try a BR24. There's all the BR24s that it knows by that name. And all you do, you just have to pick one, the one that's closest to the one you have, and click OK. And there it changes to BR24. Click OK again. Get off of this, and now There it is in your icons. Even though it's a wrong locomotive for this 995605, I don't mind. So that's all there's to it. Okay, answered that. Done. There's a gentleman named Scott working with another gentleman named Gordon. Wanting to know about the setup of the CS3. Want to know what the purpose of a MS2 is and what it does. Basically, when you plug a mobile station 2 into the central station, it's an auxiliary controller is all it is. It becomes an auxiliary device. It will use the database of inventory of locomotives from the central station and also the turnout information on the keyboard of it. So it's just another controller, basically.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's just another knob for you to twiddle.
Yeah.
So, okay, we have a couple of questions, so we can probably answer from email. Let's see. Okay, we have a gentleman here. I guess who answered this one with the S88s? He has 7 S88s. He's filled 3 of the S88s without any issue. Then he added something with the 7th. He added a 7th S88, and he can't get a read switch to activate on the CS3. Okay, so there are a couple of issues here. You may either have, as he mentioned, it could be a possible faulty RJ45 or Ethernet cable that connects the 6th S88 to the 7th S88. That's easy to check. Just swap out cables, see if it works. You do not have to wire your S88s in a loop. It's just a chain from one to the other. Make sure you obviously kind of plugged into the correct ports because they are directional. The other thing that you want to double check when you're regarding S88s is you do need to make sure that if you're using let me share my screen quickly. All right. So the thing, if you're using like a Link S88, for instance, which is basically a hub for backwards compatibility, you do want to be sure that you correct the length for the S88 bus. So if he's using this L88 and he's got 7 other S88s, then you need to make sure that the bus length, depending on which port he plugs into on that L88, is adjusted to accommodate the extra numbers. Without this, let's say connected to a direct S88, I don't know if I have that window. Is that through the GFP? Yeah. So if you're just using the underside port on an S88, you have an S8 under the TFP3 setting. You have a length for your S88 bus, and you don't have to worry about bus 1, 2, or 3. It's just going to go through the GFP set, and make sure you adjust that number for that encompasses. You can see here it was defaulted at 5, or maybe I set it for 5. Since you have 7, change that number to 7. It can be higher if you want to. There's no issue with that. What you can't do is you can't have a lower number. Otherwise, it's your CS3 just won't recognize those extra S88s that you got connected.
It stopped searching at that number.
Yeah. Or scanning. Yeah. Right. So
Yeah.
either way. Then we do have a question regarding, and hopefully, let's cover the live. Oh, this is the same person who sent me an email that I was just about to read. So Rick Hall, he basically, sorry, I shouldn't have said your name, Rick, the other Rick.
There's another one.
There's another, yeah. Hopefully he's not as annoying as the one we're dealing with, or not you, Rick Hall, Rick Sinclair. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. It's kind of a long question here, so let me see if I can figure a way to summarize this here. How do you detect Decoder circuit board addresses without opening up the locomotive. That's definitely a good question. His Loco is on the programming track. What do I look for on the CS3 screen?
Yeah, you're still sharing.
Yeah, just trying to figure out where's the, because you actually probably know this better than I do.
Yeah, I know.
Why don't you do this? Because you have a locomotive inventory and I don't. So,
Yeah.
so I'll stop sharing and hand it over to you. There is a question while we cover this. Is it possible to move Loco icons around in your Loco inventory so that you can place the active Locos at the beginning to access quickly to control them? There's ways to kind of move them around generally, but for custom placement, I do kind of wish that was a feature.
No, but let's look at that real quick because that gives me a couple ideas, and then we'll get back into
Yeah, we'll get back
other
to you.
question about discovering addresses. So you can't change the name.
Well, he's talking about the Loco inventory. Is that what you're still trying to do?
Right, but he's talking.
Not the icon inventory.
No, he says the Loco icons around in your Loco inventory. Okay. Oh, okay, okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I guess you would have to sort it. You can sort it by type or sort it by history.
Yeah, history is supposed to be the last use, but for mine, it's been kind of buggy. I don't know if it's actually been absolute. So
And address, we could get into the debates about address when you're talking about MFX locomotives. It looks like it assigns a unique address. Well, how can it sort it if it's a unique address and all this stuff? But we won't get into that.
I think we had more flexibility back with the CS2 because I do kind of remember we were actually able to access the newer ones, but the CS3 is kind of I wish they did kind of have a panel here that would just work for selected use.
Yeah, it would have to be history, I guess, for your
Yeah.
most recently used. That's what CS2 used, recently used category.
And yeah, so just in case there's another way that maybe you can access some of these quicker, drag the go ahead and drag it so that it's full screen on the Loco inventory.
Oh,
So I got a call from Richard Weeks, so let me pick that one
yeah,
up.
go ahead. Tell them to log on so you won't bother us. Okay, so here you can have multiple locomotives on your screen by history, and that would give you, I think, 7, maybe 9 across the screen. I don't have enough in my inventory here on this central station. And also you would get the ones that are on the sides. So you can have, I believe, up to 11.
12. So you've got the 8 in the middle. I mean 10. You've got 8 in the middle.
10 in the middle. Okay.
On each side.
I don't have enough locomotives in my inventory, so I didn't.
Yeah, I can see that. I can load up an older system and that would show.
That's okay. Let's get back into
let's get back to the question.
Discovering the address of a locomotive. Okay, so it is a little bit of a process. The CS2 was honestly a little bit easier. What you have to do, whether it's DCC or Marklin Motorola, and we're talking about not MFX ones, is you have to add a locomotive first. Okay, so you have to go through the manual input of putting a locomotive in your inventory. Now let's assume it's a Marklin Motorola decoder, which would be a dip switch decoder or an FX decoder. And you don't bother putting in an address because you don't know what it is. You can change the name if you want and the type if you want, but honestly, it may not discover it. So why bother going through that information? Basically, all you have to do is put the decoder type in there and then click OK. Okay, so that puts a default locomotive in your inventory. Now, what's going to happen is, it's going to change how it looks at the locomotive once it's in your inventory. Now we can go to edit locomotives. We'll get back into that same locomotive. And now there's a default image, which kind of doesn't matter, just picked one because of the name, the thing closest to the name. But now you'll see here, there's a read button. And this, if you have the Locomotive on your programming track and you click the read button, it's going to search for the address. And again, this central station is not hooked up to a layout, so it's not going to find anything, but it will search for the addresses. And what it does is it gives an electrical pulse on each address. And when it sees a draw, that's the address. Now, this seems to work okay with most Motorola decoders. It's hit and miss with a non-Marklin decoder, meaning a DCC locomotive. So we haven't figured out why it doesn't do it every time 100%, but you know, we didn't program it, so we really don't know. It's going to be the same thing for a DCC locomotive also. So it's just you have to input it into your central station, into the inventory, and then you have the read button here. So that's basically it.
Just bear in mind that you know, it's like if there's any kind of proprietary information on a third-party decoder, I don't really know how it would react to that, so we can't really answer that question.
That may or may not read it.
Yeah, it should work overall. But anyways, so that's that. Let's kind of go to this partially the email question. In this regards, shutting down the CS3, they're sort of the reader or the person who wrote says there's three ways that he can shut down the CS3. You can use an external power source and just shut that off. You can hold the stop bar down for several seconds and then it will shut down the CS3. And then you can shut down using the system CS3 shutdown check. Well, essentially, that's basically sort of this way. Let's kind of say this. Don't just turn off power to the CS3. That let's eliminate that one right there. That's never really, it's not the greatest idea. You can do it. And let me cover that further when I get in there. You can also use the stop bar just to do sort of a shutdown, but I would kind of reserve that when you need to have like an emergency or when you're maybe the machine freezes up, and hold that stop bar down so that it cycles on stop. But essentially, if you are going to shut down your CS3, always do either the shutdown procedure. Ideally, do a save backup first, then shut it down, and then from that point, you'll see the screen go to a login icon, and from there, you can actually power down your CS3 using a power strip or just unplug it. But do not just unplug it while your system is still running. Do the shutdown first, and then then you can use whatever method you want to kill power to the CS3, and that includes, you know, just connecting it to a power strip and turning off the power strip.
It's a computer. You don't just unplug your computer from the wall once you're done typing
right. It's because
a word form.
Yeah, it's because you have operational memory, and you know, it's like unplugging it. You're not saving any of that. It's just going to wipe itself up from the temporary memory, and that's what operational memory is. It only fills up those memory banks when the system is up and running. It doesn't necessarily save it there unless you save it. And, you know, once you power down and that memory depletes itself from energy, you've lost all that data. So save your system or definitely use, when you use a shutdown button, it does save a little bit, but doesn't save it in a restorable file. Okay. So, yeah, just follow those procedures: shut down or save, shut down, and then unplug it. Okay.
And that was did you cover the on-off procedure question?
That was that question. Yeah. So that one is there. There are a couple more questions to this.
I can handle this one.
Gonna go there. The automatic grade crossing.
Yes, the automatic grade crossing, which is for some reason one of my favorite accessories, and I don't know why. So the problem is basically this gentleman has installed the new automatic grade crossing, and with the supplemental track section, so he has a double track going through the grade crossing, And he's saying that, you know, the story we always get, oh, I installed everything correctly and it's not working. Where occasionally, yes, that does happen. I don't know of anything with this grade crossing, but he says that every time he puts track power down, the gates come down and they stay down. Okay, so what's basically happening somewhere in the line? Let's see. This grade crossing works off the ground, basically the O from the rails, and when that ground is that ground circuit is closed, it operates the gates. So that's why AC wheels work in contact sections, and this grade crossing works exactly the same way. The AC wheels close the circuit from one rail to the other, and the gates come down and the lights go on and everything works fine. And what's happening somewhere in the line, you have a closed ground. You're getting ground from the rails to the grade crossing. Now, whether it's, I don't know how many times I've done this. I'm sure Curtis has done it. When you're clipping in C-Track, you're clipping the contacts underneath. You look at it and you clip it and you put it down. You got to remember, you got to clip the other side of the track, the other end of the track, the bridge and the other end of the track. And you have to have your insulators on the correct, the insulator sleeves and the correct tabs of the C-Track. As Curtis is illustrating there in our low def cameras.
Definitely hard to see on low def.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you got a bridge point here, and you got a bridge point on this side here. Make sure you clip both of those, and then the thing is, don't just clip them. Sometimes you just want to clip it, and then the tab that you have, push it down out of the way.
Yeah, you clip the tab, you push it down. You got to make sure you have the insulator on the correct end. Okay, so when you look at this upside down and you put an insulator on the rail end.
Yeah, don't put it like this where it's crossing rails, right?
Yeah, because it's not going to work. You have to put it on one end of one track and the other end of the other track that inserts into it. And you got to remember that when you're looking at it upside down in your hand, you put it down and it's going to be the opposite. And that's where it always got me. It's like, oh, dummy, I put it on the wrong, I put the sleeve on the wrong tab.
Yeah, if you hold it vertically and you're cutting it on this, right, when you put it down, make sure it's insulated on the same rail. Because if you kind of do it this way,
yeah,
that's what, it can get switched around easily. You just got to make sure you're on the same rail.
So the short story is you're getting a ground from your rails activating the grade crossing.
Yeah, essentially what's happening is unless you cut these tabs and you look at it from this side, you're still getting a circuit connection from this rail to that rail, this rail to the upper rail, or either vice versa. And that's what you need to make sure you're not happening. And when you put those insulated tracks, that's the one with the cut is the rail that you need to isolate.
And it's the same thing for a brake module, because you have to.
There's 3 of them you got to deal with.
Yeah, basically. Well, I guess contact tracks, not really the brake modules. The brake modules are the center rail.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, so.
But the contact tracks, if you're using contact tracks, so hopefully that helps. It doesn't really tell you I'm not going to say you did wrong, because you may not have done anything wrong. It could be just that there's a possibility that there's something wrong with the grade crossing, but most likely you're getting a bleed in from your ground. Oh, is there a way to reduce the volume of the random sounds that are playing with the running sounds? Well, yeah, that's the second question. Is a loaded question. How do you adjust the braking sounds so they're always triggered when you brake?
Yeah.
Yeah, about that.
That's a balancing act.
So supplemental question. Okay, so a supplemental question with the gentleman that has a grade crossing. He's saying insulators, something more to buy. Yeah, you need insulators.
Yes and no. It depends. For your grade crossing, if you're using the 2 pieces of track that came with your grade crossing, Those are actually insulator break
Insulated.
tracks.
Okay, if you have those all the way on the outsides and then you cut all the track in the center, yes, that should work. But it sounds like you're still getting a bleed. Now, insulators are, we automatically go to the word insulators when we're cutting track because we're usually using them for contact tracks. So now even with C-track, there is a possibility. Do I have another piece? I don't have another piece. Oh, yes, I do. Okay, so with your C-track, I've had this happen to me. There is a slim chance that this is happening. Okay, so you have two pieces of C-track. In fact, I have an insulator in that on that one there for some reason. And you have your C-track together. Okay. Now, you could possibly be getting the track butting up against each other and causing contact on an insulated rail. I've seen that happen, and I've had it happen. And when a locomotive goes over it, you get an intermittent contact, which is what you don't want. And I believe that's why on these insulators, there's a little tab that points up. And if you put that so that the tab points up, it gives you a little space between the tracks. If I can get it back on here. And it helps prevent that track from butting together. And I can't get the...
I have a contact like that that's doing that. I thought I fixed it, but apparently it's still there, and I kind of confirmed it the other day. So yeah, the top of the rails, the insulators are basically isolating the underside of the track, and there's if the rail itself extends a little long, and you have sort of like that bow effect in your track, well, you're basically drawing that one rail to the other rail, and it makes contact, especially when the track's loaded down by a train or something. So.
Yeah, so you can do that, and that does put a little bit of a gap in there that will help that. You can also probably scooch the rail down a little bit once you have them together. Put a screwdriver in there to spread them out a little bit, something like that. Make sure you don't have rails butting together. Okay, so back to Michael's question: is there a way to reduce the volume of the random sounds that are playing with the running sounds? I would have to explore that. I'm not entirely sure you can do it with the central station on a factory decoder. Possibly.
Well, the issue there is that each sound is sort of mixed to a certain volume.
Yes.
And when you adjust the volume on a locomotive using your CS3, that's the sound volume that you can see right away. That's just the master volume. So that does not change the mixed volume underneath it.
Yeah, that's a global setting.
Yeah, so what you need to do is you really need to get into a decoder program. There's a M decoder tool that Marklin has or whatever.
It doesn't work for factory decoders. You can't get into it.
Yeah, for factory decoders, that's also an additional story because some of the factory decoders, you really can't get in there and edit. But if you really needed to adjust random sounds, or if you wanted one sound, ideally if you had a single sound you wanted a little louder, it's better to edit one than edit 10. And plus the way that sound files are mixed so that they're sort of seamless, you really have to know what you're doing. So it's not really sort of I get that some of the balance isn't quite the way you want it. Just be careful when you're doing it, if you're going to dive into it.
Yeah.
And
If it's possible, I would have to go to this one and play around with it to see if it would work, but I'm not gonna do that right now. If it's possible in the CS3, it would be in the function mapping, but somewhere. But I don't think you can get to it with the CS3 and edit it.
no, I don't think you can actually edit sound functions.
No. I do know you can do it on a new decoder that you're setting. And the other question he had is, how do you adjust the braking sound so that they're always triggered when you brake? That's kind of the tricky question. What is it? The top speed, the braking threshold, and the loco speed. Okay, so the way I equate this question is it's almost like when we used film cameras in an SLR. You got three factors that you have to have correct to get a good picture: the shutter speed, the film speed, and the aperture. Well, it's the same thing in a locomotive. It's what your top speed is set at in your locomotive decoder. And I'm not talking about running it at top speed. I'm talking about the top speed that it is set at, because you can lower that. Your braking threshold and what speed the locomotive is going. And also attached to what speed the locomotive is going is how fast the locomotive goes, knob is turned from that speed to zero. And there's no set answer, because you're balancing, you're juggling three different things. There's no set answer. You just got to kind of have to play with it and get happy with it.
Another way to look at it is, it's like if you're driving your car and you're driving your car really fast, you don't have ABS brakes, by the way, and you slam those brakes really hard, you're gonna get, if you're dropping from 100 to 0, you're gonna get a lot of like tire squeal, for instance. But if you're driving at 5 miles an hour and you slam on your brakes, well, you're not gonna get any squeal.
Yeah.
Likely your car is just gonna stop. So it's that threshold that he's talking about. What triggers that threshold? And Rick and I, we tend to run our locomotives pretty slow, so it's not always that we get brake squeal. And plus, it's sort of like the analogy I was saying. Slamming on your brakes is gonna try to get it to squeal more, but if you gradually apply pressure to your brakes, it's not going to squeal. So it's that balancing act. How quickly you're braking, what was the speed you're going at when you applied the brakes,
And what
and
percentage of your top speed is what is it that it's going at?
yeah.
So, yeah, it seems like the newer locomotives have a lower threshold, so to say. I've noticed that newer locomotives will squeak a lot easier. The brake squeal will go off a lot easier. So I believe at the factory they've addressed that somewhat, to make the customers happy.
Yeah, and play around with the numbers a little bit, and you might not see any results. I think, I don't know, maybe my memory's faulty or not, but I remember seeing like a brake squealing that wouldn't happen if I set it close to 0. But then when I did that on another locomotive, it didn't happen until I set it too closer to 255. So
Yeah,
you might have to go to extremes to figure out where that threshold is marked on.
right. Curtis and I have played around with it where we set everything really high, and with the threshold I think really low, and very long, like 6 foot long braking distance, and this thing just squealed all the way down the track as it slowly stopped.
Fun to
Just
watch, but
just,
not
just to
fun to
play with it.
do. Yeah.
Pardon me, what would you say?
It's fun to watch, but not something you do on an everyday.
Yeah, it got annoying pretty quick.
Okay, so we do have a comment. There's one gentleman. He says that if you want to sort of customize your icon list to have something more frequently, the suggested solution is, just set the setting for alphabetical, but put a number in front of the locomotive name. Yeah, that's great. You're going to have to go in and change the name of all the locomotives that you want at the top of your list, but it's a solution that will probably work.
Yeah, yeah, and
um
yeah, that'll
there
work.
Yeah, there's a question here: how can he assure smooth coupling with Marklin couplers? He's got a level gauge, so that they're on the same sort of level. Is, I guess, if he's got uh, manipulation to them. I don't know if I have an answer. I do have a couple of comments though. coupling on a straight track when your cars are aligned is going to be a lot easier than trying to couple anything on a curve. Don't do that. And then as far as whether or not it's on an incline or whatnot, um, doesn't really matter. I don't know if there's a way to bend them. And if you're talking about current conducting couplers, those have sort of a high resistance to coupling because they're trying to ensure that you have good contact between the contact points. So every once in a while, you kind of have to be aware that they don't couple smoothly like a non-current conducting coupler.
Yeah, a lot of times you have to really press them together. They're not made for switching maneuvers. They're made for conductivity.
Here's one question here. Maybe you can sort this out. He's tinkering with the startup forward and reverse controls to get a clear action reaction. I don't really follow that as an issue. Some locomotives with sound have a delay issue before it starts up or reverse.
I was reading the question. What was that question? I didn't hear you.
He's basically commenting that the forward reverse control of a locomotive doesn't seem. My take is that he's not getting a really smooth action or reaction from changing directions.
Is that an analog locomotive or a digital locomotive?
Yeah, it's unspecified. Sometimes if you kind of see other issues going on with like controls of your locomotives, um,
Digitally.
then you got to ask if you're having a digital control issues, and if that is common and you see it happening in specific areas or it happens more often. The solution there is, it sounds like you'd need a a booster. You need something to sort of reinforce or reestablish the digital control that's generated. You can do that either by having more feeds to the track so you have a better distribution of power. This is something that I covered in the last newsletter. Or you just might actually need a booster. So that's there. As far as reverse control of the actual locomotive, I know locomotives with sound, they're not going to respond right away, especially when the sound's on, because they might actually be keyed so that the sound actually goes through its cycle before the locomotive starts to move. Do you have anything that you might want to comment on that, Rick?
No, that's about it as far as digital locomotives. Analog, it would just need an adjustment of the reverse unit, but
Yeah. All right, great. One more question came.
We got a question about cleaning tracks. What's the best system? The best system is what works for you. We don't recommend alcohol. We don't recommend harsh solvents. Smoke fluid makes a great track cleaner because actually, there we go, I froze. What you actually want is you want the track to be conductive, not clean. So conductive is what you want. And track cleaning fluid, depending on what it is, we don't recommend alcohol. Smoke fluid seems to work best. As far as cleaning the center stud, I don't really recommend cleaning the studs in the center. It'll tear up your rag or whatever. And plus the sliders should be cleaning that. Now, if you're having trouble with it and it's not, it stalls in a certain spot and your slider is dirty, I clean the slider. That you can clean with some alcohol if you want.
Are we under restrictions not to mention the stuff we usually mention?
No.
Okay, so we so Rick was saying use smoke fluid. We found out that smoke fluid is generally largely proportionally kerosene.
Kerosene.
So we use kerosene to clean up the rails. Again, what Rick said about the center slider, it's more frictional. It usually should be cleaned by the sliders.
Right, and if it's not, it could be your slider that's out of adjustment. The slider needs to be flat, not completely flat, but as flat as you can get it. And you can hold a metal ruler or something up against it, something that is flat and straight, and you'll see it's either bowed in or out. And if you're bowed in or out, you're only making contact with half or less of the little studs in the center. So yeah, that could cause problems.
Okay, so we got another question, or we got Gary Walden has his hand up.
Oh, let Gary talk.
All right, Gary, we're gonna put you on mic. So
Unmute.
go ahead and hey, Gary, how's it going?
Hi guys. Hi guys.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah, I have a couple sliders that they get black spots on them, and it makes the train stall out. And I just take it off and clean it with the eraser.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I put it back on, runs great. But I cleaned the track, and I'm going, why am I getting just these certain black spots on a slider?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot, and usually that's the slider's not flat. And because if you've got a slider, how do I illustrate this? If you've got a
I
slider,
didn't know that the residue you're saying is actually from a non-flat slider.
it can be, because if you got a non-flat slider, and I don't really have a good way, it's got a bow in it. It'll have a bow in it. Okay, and so only the two ends are touching your center studs. So basically, you're only getting 2 or 4 of those contacts at the same time, and it's only in one spot, front and back of your slider.
No, it's usually in the middle of the slider. That's the problem. It's
It
not
may be bent down then.
Okay.
And again, depending on how bad it is, it will only be touching probably a few more than if it's bent up. And
Okay.
if you make it nice and flat, you're going to have the entire surface with going to be covering the center rails, the center stud, and it'll be quieter also.
Right.
So I covered that a couple of newsletters back about how important it is, and I equated it to because we're old. You could hear it. You can hear the slider when it's not adjusted right. It sounds like when I used to put playing cards in the spokes of my bicycle, and you can just hear it clicking over all the studs. So make sure it's nice and flat and then see. But it could be that it's corroded enough, it's arced enough that it's gone through the chrome and started getting a soot, so to say, contamination, and it just keeps building up on the slider from there.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. So George, he has a digital locomotive and doesn't know its address. Assumes it's DCC type, but not sure. How do you register it in the CS3? Well, that's what we covered earlier. Let's see, you're going to have to, we'll go over it again real quick. You're going to have to load a locomotive. Okay. We're going to add a locomotive. You're going to leave it in DCC up here. You're going to leave it at address 3 because you don't want to really change anything. It may not read it. And you click OK. Okay, so you put the locomotive on your programming track. And what we're going to do is we're going to get back into that locomotive in the edit screen right here, DCC Loc 3 edit. You can see it's DCC 3. And now we have this box that says read. Okay, I'm going to click that read box, and it's going to read for any power draw on the programming track. And when it gets done with that, this one will say it can't find it because this Central Station 3 is not hooked up to any track. And it may read it, it may not. If it doesn't, you're just going to have to kind of guess. If it does, then you're in business. It will populate the address here with the address it finds. And you just click OK and off you go. But if it's not a Marklin decoder, it may not read it. So stop sharing.
Okay. So there's a question here. Can you, gentleman wants to know, can you put track feeds in a contact area? Yes, that is viable. Just remember that if you have a contact area and using a contact track, let's say this is the rail that you're using for a contact track. It's okay to put a track feed up here. because this is going to be your live rail, right? The way the circuit track works, or contact track, it just takes the current connection from this side to that side. Since this side is insulated, don't put the track feed there, because you're just supplying power again, and you're not really insulating it. So just put a feed on that upper side, or the non-insulated side, and then you can put your and then your contact won't be touched. Okay, that's it. And then we actually had a question that I typed in an answer for, but you might actually want to answer this question. Wanted to know what you have running in your background there.
Oh, this is our new, even though it's old. You probably can't hear me anyway.
Meanwhile, I'll answer this other question while you do that. So this regards to the gentleman with that may need a booster. You're not going to see any kind of real indicator. The only kind of indicator I can tell you that you'll run across is you'll start seeing when you send commands from your central station to a device, and the device isn't reacting appropriately, then that's your digital signal is probably degraded, or it's not getting a clean enough instruction stream on your layout. So for instance, I had this on a layout where my signal lights weren't switching over, and at that time they were controlling track movement. And when your signal lights fail and you got trains running into each other, that's sort of your first indicator. So what's going to happen is you're going to lose control of devices first before you actually lose power of your devices. So that's the only indicator you're going to have. There's nothing hardcore written. You just have to observe it. And when you have control issues, look into the either track feeds or a booster. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I knew a guy in Decoder once. Sorry, had to do it. Okay, so the locomotive I'm running, Curtis and I just got these. This is a 2018 MHI dealer locomotives.
I repeat, we just got them.
We just got them 3 years late because we ordered them and they ran out. So they had to make more, and they were making like 10 more, and we got lucky enough to get one of those. And then there's 2 sets so far of the MHI container cars. 2 different sets, one for each year, and this year's the last one. So that's what's running in the background because it's new and it's neat and I like it.
All right. Do we have any? I think we've pretty much answered all the questions we received in emails. Or was there one that we didn't catch?
Emails? I think we're okay on emails. Here we go. Is it allowed to place a ballast in between the rails of C-track? Will it mess up the power as it releases the center post? Yeah, if you put too much ballast in there, it'll lift up your slider. And also, if you put it in turnouts, it could interfere with the piece that moves back and forth. So normally for C-track, what people do is when they put the ballast on it, that's the same color, which somebody that makes couple manufacturers make ballast. It's the exact same color as C-track. It's amazing. They only put it on the outside where the ramps on the sides are, so to say, of the C-track.
Kind of softens that.
Put it in the middle.
Yeah, it softens that ramping.
Yeah. Let's see. We kind of have an in. The guy's making a comment about the cars that I just showed, and we kind of have an in with Marklin. So we can occasionally order some of the special items. We don't always get to, but occasionally we can.
Yeah, we're generally restricted for items that are for dealers only. But okay, yeah, we do get a little bit of a heads up there. Sorry to tease you guys with trains that are hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes we order them and they say no, you can't have them. So we're victims just like you guys sometimes.
What gauge wire should I use for the main bus or feeder wires? I think what did I wrote? I think the gauge wires that you can use. I think what's the gauge that they use for the 1 gauge? That's not 18 gauge, is it? Or is that 18?
Uh, I really don't know what the gauge is, but if you have a large layout, normally, you can just use the Marklin. I'm frozen there. Can you still hear me?
Unfortunately.
Okay. So I didn't know if when I froze, if you could still hear me or
I
not.
still got you. You're still
So what I like to say is that if you have a standard size layout, 12 by 8, just a standard house bedroom, you can just use the standard Marklin wire, and that'll be fine. But if you're going to run a larger layout that's bigger, I tend to say use the 1 gauge wire for the bus, and then just the regular Marklin wire for the local.
Yeah, I actually wrote in the newsletter article that just was released that I think it's 22 to 24 gauges what the standard Marklin hookup wire is. I think I'm using 18 gauge. 18 or 20 is probably enough. I do kind of feel that 14 gauge might be overkill. That's the 14 gauge is typically like the zip cord wire that's used on a light switch. This the 20 and 18 gauge is robust enough. Plus, you don't have to deal with really thick insulation to kind of get through if you're using insulated wires on your power bus. So yeah, that's my take on it, anyways. But obviously, you guys can choose whatever feed wires you need. Or
Yeah, Mark has a nerd question for you, nerd.
yeah. Have you ever dealt with rope rail? That's funny. I just watched a Marklin of Sweden video, and he was telling his viewers that he uses rope rail. I played with rope rail
Back in 2006.
somewhere early back then. It's open source. It actually works pretty good. I think the reason why maybe I haven't done so, well, there's probably several reasons. One, I don't have a laptop that I can connect to my layout anymore. Um, the other thing is it was actually going to double the amount of at that time it was doubling the amount of contact tracks that I needed to wire up, and I really didn't want to sort of go into that with that layout. And it's actually pretty good as far as I know. I'm an open source guy. I prefer to find software that I can use without having to pay subscription fees or whatever. So if you want to experiment with it, I think it's sound software. It's fun to work with. Having two separate sections on the layout, electrically separated, one fed by a CS, the other fed by a booster. Isn't there a problem when the slider of Loco bridges the two circuits at the location when these two sections meet? Well,
No.
not really. That's why
Now,
you have an insulator on those.
yeah, but you need to be using the new boosters. 60174 or 60175, I believe, will be fine.
Yeah, part of the, what I think part of what Rick is referring to is you use a new booster, it's matched to the system, especially when it regard for MFX locomotives. And I found that out on my layout, my older layout. I used old boosters with an MFX driven controller, and every once in a while I'd have those issues where I'd start up, and at that time. If you had a train that you stopped on a non-MFX booster and it didn't register into the system, well, you had zero chance of that loading because it's not an MFX booster. You'd have to literally take that locomotive, move it onto the MFX powered supply area, and if you have a staging yard, a lot of tunnels, that is not a fun thing to have to deal with. So yeah, use the new boosters. Saves a lot of effort. So yeah, gentlemen, if you're dealing with millimeters for the gauge for layouts, 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters. Gary, I saw your hand was up, and if you want to say anything, go ahead and raise your hand again.
Yeah, it looks like you put it down.
And yeah, so there is an anonymous that says the recommended feeder gauge wire is 18 gauge. So like I said, 18 gauge works. 20. Yeah, I think I just don't have a picture of the gauge in my head, but I do use 18 gauge. So that's that. Gentleman is using Rockwell. He says it works very well with the CS2, CS3. So it's in English as well. Yeah.
Obviously, there's been a lot of development since 2006.
Yeah, and it's like it's like if you're doing automation like on the CS3, like I am, it's fun because it's more of a challenge to kind of get everything to operate on the CS3. You have different challenges when you're using Rockwell because you have to basically you're assigning locomotives to blocks, and as the locomotive moves, it changes the assignments from one block to another, and it's more randomization. So take from that what you will. Basically, the way I like to describe it is your CS3 is as good. It's one step short of absolute computer control. Take that as you will. It all depends on your challenge and what you want to do. There are some things that I kind of personally wish that they could have some development on the CS3, but trying to talk to a nerd like me and then trying to talk to another nerd who doesn't speak your language is never going to work very well.
I thought all nerds spoke the same language.
Yeah. Not necessarily true. Anyways, so there you go, folks.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was say it's been an hour. We're doing hour formats now. 2 hours was kind of long, but when we had a subject, it worked okay. So we're over an hour. Not that we have to stop, but if there's no more questions,
and occasionally, we'll probably just still do webinars if we have any topics that need addressing. I mean, right now, and a lot of the questions where you can refer to past webinars, but those are 2 hours long, so there's a lot covered in those.
Sometimes
there's a lot of dead airspace.
Sometimes it was a really short presentation, and then an hour and 50 minutes of this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, again, if you guys want to say anything or you have any questions, you can raise your hand, or if you have any questions, go ahead and type them up. So, do we have any other sort of any developments that we could relay or?
No, I don't want to mention it, but we are getting a surprise fairly soon from Marklin. Oh, trade shows upcoming. Well, yeah, there is kind of one in the San Francisco area that we're doing. July 24th and 25th. Email us and we can send you the details. How's that? If you're in the San Francisco Bay Area or want to be at the end of July, we'll send you the details.
Milwaukee. Yeah, right now I don't really know what's going on there because I know Marklin has us on a travel restriction, but I forget how long it was. I definitely know I've had to cancel a trip to Nashville this month.
Our first and only show, if they do it, will be Train Fest in Milwaukee, and that's in November. We don't know whether we are now or not, but that's the only chance we have this year of going to a show. So that all depends on the factory if they allow Marklin USA to go to a show this year.
Yeah, and that's sort of the key thing. It's really more or less not Marklin USA's
call. It's a factory call.
Yeah.
So that's a definite. We don't know.
And hopefully, maybe in January we go to the Big E. Who knows?
Hopefully in January, yeah, at Amherst in Massachusetts. If they're having that, that's a fun show. I like that show because that's just myself and Curtis. No boss, so we can do whatever we want.
In trouble.
We generally do because no one's gonna know. So
it's fun seeing the guys out there. That's a nice big show.
Yeah, and it's a good chapter out there, the ETE chapter. So
All right. Well, shit, I don't know. You want to carry on for another 10 minutes and we'll call it at,
we'll give it a little while. You know, they can watch us talk at each other.
oh, we got a hand up. Gary, or did you raise your, Gary, keep trying to click your name.
Oh, Gary keeps.
And I'm unmuting now. Okay.
All right.
The CS2 update or CS3 update. Have you done that yet?
Yes.
Okay, I came to the webinar a little late. I had another thing going, but I still haven't done it yet, and I still have some questions about it because I watched a YouTube on, but it's all in German.
Okay.
So I tried to do. I did it in closed captioning in English. It works pretty good, but I still, that opening session I have a problem with, whether I want to go one way or the other. I don't know what to do on that.
What do you mean by opening session?
Well, the opening session, they have 2 sessions that you can do, old style or new style, or picking your inner.
They changed the tutorial.
Yeah,
And I have it. I actually haven't seen it because I have it clicked off on my central station, so I haven't seen what the new tutorial is.
Yeah, and I didn't even look at it. I guess because we're so familiar with it. But the funny thing is, there was something I did notice earlier when Rick was doing a quick demo. Was I have sort of, somebody noted that some of the dialog boxes are in German rather than English. Those are the warning boxes. So just kind of be aware that I think that might be one of the issues. As far as the startup procedures or whatever, sorry, Gary, I really
now
can't.
the first window, you get 2 deals.
Yeah.
I looked on the web on the deal. It clicks on one and clicks on the other, and one says instant startup, and the other one, I think it says regular startup, whatever.
Okay. You know what? And this is a guess. The quick startup might actually sort of be sort of that. There was a setting that, it's like starting your system using the operating setups that you used when you shut down the system. In other words, if you had trains running at certain speeds, do you want them to resume? And again, this is a guess. So that would mean it's actually going to take from sort of the temporary memory that said, oh, this locomotive was running at this speed, so resume speed. The other one is sort of the standard procedure where it's just going to operate as business as usual. Since we're sort of very weak on this answer, I don't think there's any harm in playing with it either way. I think at this point, it's like, if one seems detrimental, well, just use the other one. It's
All right.
You can't go wrong with the procedure as it is, right? So
I read the release notes briefly, and they said they simplified the tutorial, so that might be the quick startup, is a simplified tutorial.
Okay.
So it might just refer to the tutorial itself.
Yeah.
Because I have to, I have 4 mobile stations. So I have to do each one individually, I think it is, when they update that.
If you go in the system menu, you can shut it off so it doesn't give you a tutorial, probably.
Okay.
But wait, are you referring to updating your mobile stations?
Yeah, well, they update your mobile stations at the same time you're doing your central station.
It's usually a separate update, a secondary update, because you'll still have the red dot. And yes, you have to have them connected.
Right.
And you'll probably have to do them one at a time. And when it asks you if you want to initiate the update, you always click to initiate the update on the central station. Don't click to initiate the update on the mobile station.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Good point. But I can update off of the web by having everything hooked up. Do I have to pull the track power or?
No.
Well, yeah. So once you do the update to your CS3 connected, any subsystem updates and maybe updates to the mobile station 2 don't have to be plugged into the internet or your network, because
Oh, okay.
all the packets should be on there to deliver to the subsystems. It's
Okay.
just you need to get the main system on that initial update.
Yeah. Because I'm more worried about the decoders on the locomotives, because I have a lot of locomotives on my track. So I use
well, yeah.
all the track power before I update.
No, you don't have to worry about it because it'll cut track power when it wants to or needs to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. If not, I'll send it to you.
And John is saying that AJC Kids has translated some videos on the tutorial or the update. So I don't know where to find them there on their site, but you people can poke around there. We sent you a direction. You can find it from there. How's that?
Yeah. We also have there's a comment here on the YouTube channel. Tony Rensler. It says YouTube channel model train fun has full video in English, 2 parts for installing and difference between simple and standard interfaces. I'm going to take a guess. I think he's actually referring to Rockrail. So again, that channel that he's referring to is Model Train Fun. That might cover the Rockrail thing.
Yeah, that sounds like Rockrail.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to look that up, we won't object. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
But we're not going to learn it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. You can feed that in on another channel.
Yeah. All right. Well, sounds like a good time to. Oh, Gary raising his hand again.
All right, Gary. What do you got?
I tried to lower my hand. Sorry, guys.
All right. No worries.
Okay.
We did that for you, Gary.
Oh, okay. Because it says lower now.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, Gary. We'll let you
Thanks,
go.
guys. Aloha.
All right, guys. Yeah. So that was fun. That was good chatting with everybody. Oh, one more question here. One gentleman recommends heavier gauge for your bus feeds if you're running a garden. Yeah, if he's running a garden railway, yeah, definitely I would recommend thicker gauge. We're just kind of referencing an HO setup. So
automatically our mind goes to HO because that's what we collect.
Yeah. So he's using 12 gauge, 12, 14 gauge, I guess would be okay. A garden railway, you're definitely running longer runs. So yeah, take that to heart if the numbers we gave you are generally for HO. So, and then for, garden railway, LGB 1 gauge, 12, 14 gauge, I think would be 14 gauge, which should be sufficient, but the 12 gauge, if you want, sounds great to me.
All right. Well, with that,
All right.
let's leave before there's any more questions.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we will show. Tony is just kind of clarifying the mentioned model train fund that has translations. That's actually for the CS3 upgrade. If you want more details on that one.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry, we don't really have quite all the answers on that one. I think part of the problem too is we have established layouts. Well, I do anyways, and sort of pressing to actually figure out where all the bugs are doesn't happen as often. But and most of the calls that we got regarding people having issues with the CS3 were quickly resolved. No necessary bugs with the update itself, other than I think the dialogue warning boxes being sent in German rather than English language.
A lot of the sub menus, sub dialog boxes are in German anyway.
Yeah, it's a weird tagging issue. I don't quite, there's nothing we can really kind of answer that. So, all right. Thank you guys, everybody from the YouTube channel to here for whatever questions and comments you have. Appreciate it. We will be back again next month. If we don't actually have specific topics that we can relay, we'll definitely be open for questions and any kind of questions you might have or comments if you'd like to share them with us. So with that being said, thank you guys very much.
Yeah.